17 hours over 3 nights, which is not a lot of sleep. Take the day off, do something, just can't do it. Triple digit emails. And I've been reading them, just the ones I didn't read. I've added up to 100 over 2 days, maybe 2.5 since we went to the barber Friday. Christmas lights again. Okay, here, look at this guy. Dark clothing, but reflective sneakers. And actually, you see his hat was actually hunter orange, but in this light, you couldn't see the orange at all. It did him no good. Reflective clothing is everything. It was those little decals on his walking shoes that made all the difference. I don't know how many dash cams I've seen where a person just comes from that periphery on your left or right of these headlights, and after they do that, if they're walking towards you or running, there is not a thing you can do. There's a concept called suicide by truck, which is when somebody will basically walk into the path of a semi-truck, and this would make a good short feature. I'm not going to feature it because I don't want to give anyone the idea, frankly. So this will stay buried in the 50-minute archive that nobody watches. But suicide by truck is very difficult for the truck driver. I hear, emotional breakdowns on that's a well-lit bicycle, guys. What a greatly lit bicycle. Good for him. Not that you should be out this hour, but I've certainly done it. But if I can see you, you're doing well. Okay. So, suicide by truck is, again, it's very devastating for the driver. And it's also ambiguous if the person did not write a note. So we often will find, how do you know that someone's committed suicide by truck, right? Once somebody actually wrote a note and stuck it in their pocket. I said, okay, good. Well, and my joke was, well, hopefully he actually wrote the note and not the person who hit him saying, oh gosh, I better write a note. So I said, so we need a handwriting analyst to validate that note, but that's rather morbid. The other way is to, unfortunately, investigate the claim and get medical records, psychological records, see if the person had a history of depression, suicidal ideation. It's ugly, and the people around that person don't want to acknowledge that their family or friendship environment was responsible for a suicide. So they almost double down on their claim for compensation, so they don't have to accept the idea that their loved one chose to leave. And again, to say it's a choice is probably wrong. I don't think it's a choice. It's a confluence of events that leave someone with no choice based on the prison created in their brain chemistry, due to chemistry. Nice reflective vest on my left, love to see it. Some kind of LED laser, goofy as hell. But you know what? Goofy's okay when it comes to not getting killed. Goofy's okay. You see a lot of strange and novelty items here in suburbia. There's you're not going to be called the eccentric if you buy it from the right shop, I think I once lived in a small town where the only person who wore a reflective vest out in the daytime was a special needs person. It was like they put the vest on him so he wouldn't wander out in traffic or something. But in truth, he was just always outside and wanted to be protected. And I've seen accidents where people who are outside outside frequently, on foot near roadways, they are at an increased risk. You'll see right here, there's no curb on this road. A curb would help me not plow at full speed into somebody walking alongside the road. If you don't have a curb and you're walking along this road, you have a really good chance of, decent chance of really kind of having a severe injury. And the reason is if I just swerve over a little bit, you go flying. You also run the risk of being pulled under a wheel. Because if my wheel lines go over you at any point, especially after the front wheel, and the back wheel goes over you, I don't think that ends well. I had a dog once. Both axles went over the dog, and he could still walk a little bit. He walked down the driveway and laid down, and he just bled out internally, I think is what happened. But didn't really bleed on the outside at all. But the people that hit him, they were probably going highway speeds, and they're lucky they didn't damage their car. This really wasn't my dog. This was like to think that, I don't live on a highway anymore, so that's not a great place for dogs. Curb wouldn't have helped him. But going back to high-risk individuals walking in traffic, often the unhoused are doing that. You see it a lot, maybe even on this commute. There's a person or two by I-49. Too bright, asshole. I-49. Look at that, there's a train down there. You can see the light. Out twice on this track today. What was I talking about? Yeah. So the panhandlers, and I say that because it's actually a legal term for a lot of municipalities, will offer permits to panhandlers in order to keep the peace. The first time I learned about panhandler permits, I was unhappy, to say the least. But if you think about it, if you divide up your city so that only permitted people are allowed certain places, it provides a certain sense of peace and security to the individuals involved in the activity. So if you've got two people panhandling on the same intersection, one of them says, "Get out of here." The other one says, "No, I've got a permit. Can you get out of here?" And it gives a bit of a way to divide up your areas so that individuals or the organizations that get the permits, the shelters, can predictably recover some revenue. It also keeps people from getting into fights over spaces that they want. It's like gang territory, but over pennies instead of drug money right now. Probably dollars. Andrew Jackson's in some cases. It at least provides that peace. Minutes to get to 150. Don't love that. But there's not a lot to love about burning 5 gallons of fossil fuels. Not a lot. Maybe a little more. You think about it. A 5-gallon bucket. We all have those. The Home Depot buckets are 5 gallons. I use that much gasoline in a day. Maybe a little more than that. That's a lot of gasoline. That's a lot of driving. And if I were to drive for the same amount of time, but in a city, stoplights and low speeds, it would be more than that. So look at that. What a moron. Let him over. I didn't see any brake lights there. I don't know what that guy was doing, but lollygagging in a blind spot directly behind the truck. I don't respect that. There's no reason you needed to be parked in the right lane, and it's not a crime to get over to the left. Interested in this idea. You know, let's say you're that semi-truck and you're driving by an on-ramp. What duties do you owe to the cars that are trying to merge over? I've had a few claims where the driver simply says, I was in my right lane, going my speed. If he can't merge over, that's on him. So he hit me because either they try to pass the truck, they don't have anywhere to go. Could the truck have slowed down and let them over? Probably. Is that what should have happened? I think so. When I leave, there are lots of trucks that get over for me when I enter the I-70 coming back home because they don't want to be in an accident. And if you don't want to be in an accident, you will drive defensively. You will compromise your speed for your safety and for the safety of others. And a lot of high-pressure trucking operations, they just can't afford to do it. They also deal with left lane laws where they're not legally allowed to go to the left lane, so they're stuck in the right lane. Or they're not sure if they can even go to the left lane, and if they get over, then they're stuck because everybody's passing them on the right, and they can't get back over. So they are in a tough spot, but that doesn't mean that they can just run cars off the road because they're in their lane. That's my takeaway. Nine hours of sleep last night. That's a start. icy merge. Should I let this guy over or just keep going? If I had kept going, it would have been a heartbreaking event and an interaction with the vehicle behind him. High risk of an accident. So I let off the throttle and let this guy over, so he could brake check me. And why? Because of this guy, who is going 60 and a 65. Thank you, legal marijuana. I think it's legal now here. And illegally tinted windows. I tell you what, tinted windows drive me nuts. I know it makes me a, what do you call it, a curmudgeon? But your window tints, I can't see your hand signals at four-way stops. I don't know what's going on in there. And I just don't know why you need it. Are you that ugly you can't stand the thought of people seeing you? Are you picking your fucking nose? Make me see you. I don't care what your back windows have, but don't tint your front windows. That's all I've got to say about that. Anger management. That could have made a good short, but I used the F word, so probably can't do that. But I get excited about that because it's a safety thing and it's just a dumbass thing. I really don't get it. And I've heard people say, leave well enough alone if they want to do that. And I'm not going to do it. I will support the police on this issue 125% of the time. Ticket them all, make them change it, make them take it back. And make the people who do this work understand the laws about where they're doing it and about what states that person might be traveling in. It's a simple exercise in compliance. The rest of us have to follow rules, but not these body shops and not these car enthusiasts. And I just don't get it. You don't see people who collect nice cars tinting the windows so they can't see inside. I mean, anyways, nothing. Anger management. Anger management. yellow lights right there and not think, man, this is stupid. Just look at them all. There's got to be a smarter way for people to move. You know, the individuality of each car, we can go to each specific destination that we need to go to. In a sense, it's efficient for us, but you just look at this and say, how in the heck can we spend our money on this? Roads that make walls of lights day and night. Self-driving cars going to solve problems. I think we're going to see communities where the only cars allowed are self-driving. And where could we see this? We could see this in places such as the Villages in Florida, certain areas there where they have full control over what happens in their cities. So smaller, maybe retirement type communities, you can mandate that nobody drives themselves. And it either keeps people off the streets or restricts traffic to only deliveries or those who are willing to adopt the technology. And these communities are going to be the case studies, right? Elon Musk wants to build his own city, I think, in Texas, and I'm sure that the self-driving Tesla might be the only car allowed in that city, right? Or at least in certain areas. And you're going to see that slowly increase over time. And what interests me about it is the traffic management component. So if you have two vehicles that you know are going to meet at an intersection, let's adjust their speeds so that they don't meet at the intersection. So maybe you have to go 35 and a 40 for a little while, but it means you don't have to stop at a red light. It means that nobody stops at these lights, right? That has me very interested, because if we can stop those events, those red light events where you stop for no reason or for one other car, or just because the timing of the light dictates that you stop. This poses a tremendous increase in efficiency that has my interest, because to me that's really the best part about it. I'm not convinced that human factors are the reason that safety is at stake. It's the over-reliance on technology that can often cause accidents. So the only way to do it is all or nothing. So in my mind, if you try to do hybrid systems, you will not see an appreciable change in safety, because you've got the human elements that are mucking with the technology and either over-relying on it or messing it up, right? If you can take the car over and say, I don't want to go 35 and a 40, I want to go 40, even though that makes you stop at a red light, you're just being the dumb human who doesn't get it, who doesn't trust the algorithm. And that, to me, it's the 5G interconnectivity of cars that poses the greatest promise for change. If you have an event such as a bad accident, you can automatically have these cars reroute to a different route and keep traffic away from the accident. You know, things like that Or just stop the cars in a safe location. Have them go pull off to a exit ramp and wait due to hazard ahead or something. I mean, that to me is the real promise of the self-driving car. But it's not just self-driving, it's interconnectivity. And I think those things have to go together. And if they do go together, we've got a real promise for the future. For good changes. But as long as there's people like me on the road driving this thing, how do we interact with the self-driving car? The self-driving car people will be the morons who are listening to their cars and doing inefficient things, look inefficient to us because we don't get it. So that's why, again, those pockets of universal adoption in different insulated communities, private communities, that's going to be how this starts. And by the time I'm 80 years old, you will see, by the time I'm 80 years old, I predict that human operated cars will be less than 40% of the remaining vehicles. It might be 10%, it might be 0, but I think you can probably bet that in 50 years, if the self-driving thing works, I could see there being a dramatic reduction in vehicles driven by people. Now, I don't think it will be because of compelling safety data. We're not going to get compelling safety data from mixed, and that's the thing that really puts this at risk, right? If we can't get compelling safety data, and all we're doing is basing it on hypothetical accidents prevented, it's not going to work. You're not going to get a government auto mandate for the self-driving car, especially in the land of the free. People don't like to sit there and let the machine do something that they've done. Now, that can change generationally, and it can change if you get some kind of tremendous distraction. What can we do? We can create an addictive television series that's only available in the car, or whatever it is, some kind of video, some kind of new technology that's designed to keep the person in the car distracted from the fact, divorced from the fact that they're traveling at a high speed and in danger. Maybe it'll be a mist, a drug, I don't know. But if you can come, they're going to have to create something like that. And I mean, the drug effect of TV is the same as, a mist. So it's all the same to your brain. It's distractions, dopamine, it's all that. So if you can do that to calm down the masses, then you have a chance at universal adoption on a much bigger scale. You can get a government mandate for self-driven autos. You can design roads where only self-driven autos can be in the main lanes, and then there's one lane for the gas guzzler junkers like me to drive in. Those kinds of punishments will eventually push people to join the system, right? And then maybe you do free self-driving buses for the holdouts who can sit on the bus and feel more comfortable. The ability to manipulate people is possible. But that's the biggest frontier people are seeing right now. Silicon Valley, where this character, this lanky dude who's always on TV, who's in The Office, I think, too. He gets in a self-driving car. It's an early prototype, and it drives him into a storage container. and he can't stop it, and then the storage container gets placed on a boat or aircraft or something, that he ends up going to some billionaire's private island and being stuck inside the car, inside a dark storage container. You know, those kinds of mistakes. You know, the idea of preventing human factors is a little bit laughable in a system designed by humans, right? They can just keep saying, well, we've trial and errored it, we've drilled down on the issue, we've resolved this. Then a hacker can come in and screw it all up, you know. The odds that this thing takes off good, I'm not sure I call them good. I call them fair. There are fair odds that this self-driving stuff takes off. It will require accommodations in the legal system for crash claims. It will require immunity from liability for perhaps the manufacturers. And, you know, what else are people worried about? They're worried about the added weight from electric, right? A lot of these self-driving, they're planning on an electric model. And electric is heavier. The batteries are heavy. If you really need long distance travel, you need a heavy set of batteries, and that'll kill more people. So you might start seeing a reversing trend in safety data, right? And we have agencies whose sole mission, NHTSA, people like that, their sole goal is to track fatalities and decrease them. And if heavier cars actually are killing more people, it's going to be difficult for people in those positions not to speak up about it. But it will be difficult to speak up, because it's not what the political culture wants to hear. People want shiny, they want new, they want to feel like they're advancing. And if you think about it, I don't think the world we live in is that much different than the late 1960s. What's different? We still watch TV, we still drive cars, we still use copy machines. They had elevators, they had everything that Don Draper had is pretty much what we have. They had commercial air travel. They went to space. What is so different about today? In 1969, they had color TV. You know, I don't know what's different, except we've lost the avant-garde charm and we're not rioting as much, right? Although the architectural, what's that called? Whatever it is, the architecture, mid-century is becoming popular. If that were to happen, we'd really be living in the 60s. And we're all doing drugs now, apparently, legally. So it is like the 60s. If you saw the riots a couple of years ago, it really would have looked like it, you know. But what is so different? We have issues with law enforcement, we have issues with race, we have issues with conservatives and liberals, and except now the liberals want to be involved in war, sort of, kind of, and the conservatives don't. And I don't know. If I were someone who was 80 years old today, I'd love to ask I will ask someone if really life is all that different today than it was in, say, 1969. I am not seeing. They had interstate highways, you know. What is different? What has changed? And that feeling of stagnation is what can compel people to embrace the shiny and new, right? Especially when they aren't living that futuristic world that we all predicted. So what? Let's try the Google Glass. That was a flop. Let's try the virtual reality stuff. It's not really catching a foothold, and we'll try the automated cars and see if we can be the Jetsons. You know, I had a cousin who designed a flying car. I think tried to design a flying car. You know, people have always been trying to grasp and go for it. I fully support it, but you have to have a healthy bit of skepticism. You know, we actually have the flying car. It's an airplane that converts to a ground transport car. But it can't be done efficiently. You know, there are limitations to what our economy can do, what our Earth can give us in terms of resources, and that's just that. Gas prices. When I first built that giant sign, it's at $3.64, and that became my office view. I was quite disgusted to look at a $3.64 gallon of gas sign. At least there's been some reduction since. 7:30 shifters feeling like they're late. The president of my company once said, "Walk in like you own the place." I haven't quite taken his advice, but it's not bad advice.